Now, I know Steve Jobs is talked about a lot, but what I want to do isn't just recount his biography. I want to sit here, you and me, like two creators sipping coffee, and pull apart the mind, the strategies, the obsessions behind the product launches, the big headlines, because, yeah, Apple did the iPhones and Macs and whatnot, but what made Jobs tick matters for you, the creator, the builder, and the what if person. So let's rewind. Steve was born in 1955 in San Francisco, adopted by Paul and Clara Jobs. He grew up tinkering. There's a young man who, while other kids were probably playing video games, he was grabbing parts from his parents' garage and building stuff no instruction manual. That willingness to tinker, to question the normal, seeded the rest of his life. Fast forward, at Reed College he drops out after 18 months, but stays on just for the classes that interest him, like calligraphy class, that later influenced Macintosh's typography. Crazy how something seemingly random matters. Jobs himself said, "Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life." Pause there for a second. For us creators, what are the calligraphy classes in your life? What weird detours might become your signature move? Think on that for a little bit. Alright, moving on. In 1976, Steve and his friend Steve Wozniak founded Apple. They believed computers weren't just for giants, they should be for everyone. The Apple II, then Macintosh in 1984, challenged what a computer could be. Not just a tool, but a clean, beautiful, intuitive experience. And here's one of the core reoccurring strategies. Focus. In his words, focus is about saying no, and the result of that focus is going to be some really great products where the total is much greater than the sum of the parts. Saying no is underrated. If you try to chase too many ideas, you'll be mediocre at best. Jobs shut down projects, cut clutter, insisted on fewer product lines, and for Apple, that meant fewer distractions, more excellence. For us, it might mean fewer videos, fewer gimmicks, more polish. Okay, so let's talk about Steve Jobs in a way that actually helps you, not just talking about the man. Not in a wow, he was a genius, let's clap way, but in a sense of what patterns did he run? Why did they work, and which of them can ordinary creators and founders use today without needing a turtleneck and a reality distortion field? Because remember, this podcast isn't about worshiping people, it's about extracting the operating systems behind the person. So, in his early life, Steve was adopted. Moved around, tinkered with electronics in garages, dropped out of college, audited calligraphy classes. But here's what matters to you. Jobs had a habit of following fascination over logic, and fascination compounds. Most of us kill that instinct early. We think, if it doesn't make money right now, it's not worth learning. Jobs did the opposite. He followed whatever sparked something in him, even if it made zero practical sense at the time. Calligraphy? Pointless. Until years later when it became the foundation of Apple's design philosophy. He said, "You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. The value for you is build optionality. Chase a weird interest. Learn something everyone else finds useless. That's how you become the kind of creator who makes things others can't make because they never collected the dots in the first place." 2. One of Jobs' most underrated strengths wasn't engineering, it was taste. Taste is pattern recognition for quality. Jobs had a way of walking into a room, looking at 20 designs and knowing instantly which one was the one. Not because he was mystical, but because he trained his eye for decades. He once said, "Most people don't take the time to get in touch with who they really are. We don't take the time to think about our values, our goals, and our ultimate meaning." His taste came from caring more than most people care. Value for you is develop taste by raising your standards 10% beyond what feels comfortable. Not 100%, just 10%. You'll be shocked at how quickly your work separates from the pack. Number 3, people really talk about Steve's reality distortion field like it's sorcery, but at its core, it's actually simple. Jobs believed something so deeply that other people temporarily borrowed his confidence and so they believed it too. It's leadership. As long as reality eventually catches up, for creators and founders, you need just enough delusion to begin and enough discipline to deliver. Most people fail at one of those 2 steps. Too realistic, which means you'll never start, or too delusional, which means you'll never finish. Jobs balanced both. He used belief to push teams past what they thought was possible, but paired it with ruthless focus, which brings us to focus. When he returned to Apple in 1997, the company was realizing dozens of scattered products. Jobs walked in, drew a 2x2 grid and said, "We're going to make 4 great products. That's it. Everything else was killed." This is arguably the biggest lever in your life. If you want to create something exceptional, cut 80% of your projects, double down on the one with momentum. It's about removing things that dilute your best work. This channel you're listening to right now exists because you chose to focus on showing up and improving. That's a Jobs move. Jobs' business approach wasn't traditional Silicon Valley open systems. He believed to create magic, you control the entire experience. Hardware, software, retail, marketing, packaging, and story. All unified, all intentional. But here's the part nobody talked about. He combined control with relentless empathy for users. He said, you've got to start with the customer experience and then work backwards to the technology. For you as a creator or founder, you don't need to control everything, but you should control the things that shape your identity. Your tone, your structure, your visuals, your values, your audience promise. That's your closed garden. Everything else can be open. Alright, so now you got a feel for who Steve was. The curiosity, the taste, the focus. Let's slide into the part of this story that honestly might be the most valuable for you and me. Because it's one thing to build something from scratch. It's another thing entirely to come back after you've been kicked out of the company you created and rebuild it into the most valuable company on the planet. So, let's open up Case File Section 2, the comeback. In 1985, Steve Jobs was forced out of Apple. You imagine that you start a company at 21 and you take it public at 25, and by 30, you're shown the exit. The lesson here isn't the drama, it's the psychology. Jobs later said, it was awful tasting medicine, but I guess the patient needed it. Here's the takeaway for us creators. Sometimes losing your big thing gives you space to build your real thing. Jobs wasn't mature enough to yet lead the version of Apple he dreamed of. He needed time in the wilderness. We all do sometimes. When you get rejected or a project flops or a channel doesn't take off, that's not proof you're done. It might just be your apprenticeship for the thing you're actually meant to build. After he was fired, Jobs founded Next, a company that made gorgeous but extremely expensive workstations. People often called Next a failure. Wrong. Next was Jobs learning how to build a platform, not just a product. And then there's Pixar, which I think we've all heard of. Jobs bought it when it was a tiny, struggling graphics company. He poured money in, years went by, no profits. Then, boom, Toy Story. Jobs said the hardest thing when you think about focusing is saying no to hundreds of good ideas. Pixar survived because Jobs kept saying no to anything that diluted story quality. Value for you. Your side projects might be your mastery school. They just don't feel like it in the moment. Pixar taught Jobs patience, storytelling, team management, long-term endurance, and the importance of culture. Next taught him software ecosystems, design rigor, enterprise thinking, and how to rebuild himself as a leader. These were boot camps for him. You see, your failures are your boot camps. And then in 1997, Apple was weeks away from bankruptcy. The board brought back Jobs as an interim CEO, and immediately he began uncomplicating everything. Let's walk through his comeback moves like a playbook, because this is the stuff you can apply today, even if you're just starting a channel or building a small business. Comeback strategy number 1 is radical simplification. Jobs walked into Apple and sees dozens of products, printers, cameras, accessories, random devices. Nobody even remembers. His fix? A single whiteboard. 4 boxes. Consumer, pro and laptop, as well as desktop. Everything else? Cut. Jobs once said, I'm as proud of the things we haven't done as the things I have done. So here it is. That's the mindset shift. Don't scale your workload, scale your clarity. Think about your creative world. Too many content ideas? Which one actually matters? Too many features? Which one solves a real problem? Too many tasks? Which one moves the needle? The more you reduce, the more you reveal. Simplify to amplify. Comeback strategy number 2, make the user the hero. Jobs didn't design products, he designed experiences. Remember, when he returned to Apple, he wasn't competing as just another computer company. His strategy was to make Apple feel like a lifestyle. He said, you've got to start with the customer experience and work backwards to technology, as I said earlier. Most businesses start with, what cool things can we build? Jobs started with, how do we want people to feel? You can steal this instantly. Don't make videos you think are cool. Make videos that solve a frustration that your viewer can feel. Build things that people love before they even know why. The product comes second, the feeling comes first. To make somebody feel something, they'll buy. Simple as that. Comeback strategy number 3, design and story equals differentiation. Let's be real, Apple didn't always make the most powerful devices, but they almost always made the most desirable ones. Why? Because Jobs married 2 rare skills: good taste, and clear storytelling. The iMac wasn't just a computer, it was the computer for the rest of us. The iPod wasn't a music player, it was the 1,000 songs in your pocket. When you define the narrative, you define the market. Your takeaway? You need to be the clearest. The person who can explain what they do wins over the person who simply does something good. It's in the details. Okay, so that's 3 comebacks for you guys. The collapse, the wilderness, and the rebirth of Apple, but let's move into my favorite part of the entire case file, because the comeback is inspiring, sure, but the mindset that powered Apple's explosive rise, that's where the real value is for us. So let's open up section 3, Jobs' core philosophies, the deep operating system. Okay, so I keep bringing up this term, the reality distortion field. It's a phrase from the original Macintosh team describing the way Jobs could make the impossible feel negotiable. But here's the part people misunderstand. It wasn't lying or delusion, it was expectations engineered with precision. Steve believed that most people limit themselves before the real limit arrives, so he pushed people as if limits didn't exist yet. And here's a takeaway for you. As a creator, entrepreneur, or someone just trying to change your life, self-imposed limits are often scarier than the actual constraints. And Steve's gift was refusing to accept the first no. If someone said, it'll take 6 months, he responded with, what would it look like if we had 3 weeks? Not because 3 weeks was realistic, but because it forced the mind to consider possibilities instead of defaulting to excuses. This is practice. You can cultivate this. Try for the next week. Every time your brain says that will take too long, ask it, what would this look like if it took 1/10 the time? You'll shock yourself with the results. A lot of people love the idea of building something great. Jobs loved the process, even when it was brutal, uncertain, and unrewarding. There's a quote attributed to him from the early iPod era, "The journey is the reward." And yes, it's simple, but the value comes from what it implies. How can you wait to feel motivated? You have to build a relationship with repetition. Jobs wasn't obsessed with success, he was obsessed with taste, with making something excellent even when no one else cared yet. The value for you? If you build a system where the work itself is rewarding, you'll become unstoppable because most people burn out when the external validation slows down. Creators quit, entrepreneurs stall, and students lose momentum. But if you can fall in love with the cycle, draft, improve, refine, and then repeat, you'll grow even when no one's watching. This leads me on to how he used focus as a competitive advantage. There's a story from when Jobs returned to Apple in 1997. The company was bleeding money, lost in dozens of half-developed products, and then Jobs sat down at a whiteboard, listened to every team's pitch, what they were building, and then cut almost everything. And he reduced the Apple line by 70%. And then one of the engineers asked Steve, what should we tell the teams whose work isn't on the board? Jobs said, tell them they're focusing on the wrong things. Is it ruthless? Absolutely. Is it effective? Also. Absolutely. Focus is a multiplier. Every time you reduce what you're doing, the power of what remains increases, as I said earlier. For you, try picking one thing this month. Not 5, not everything. One project, one skill, one goal, and watch how your results accelerate. People say that Steve Jobs wasn't an engineer. He wasn't the one soldering circuits or writing low-level code. His real weapon was taste. Taste is the ability to look at something, a design, a product, a sentence, a video, and know instantly whether it's good or trashy. Taste is something you build slowly by paying attention. He once said, we try to expose ourselves to the best things humans have done and then bring those into what we're doing, but that's the cheat code. Study excellence. Let your brain absorb it, steal from it, remix it. Taste is pattern recognition sharpened by exposure. The value is if you curate what you consume, if you focus on quality input, your output will follow. Creators who study great creators get better faster. Entrepreneurs who study great businesses think more clearly. Even your personal life becomes sharper when you raise the quality of what influences you. So just keep this in mind. One thing that made Jobs unique was his balance. He could approach problems with a childlike curiosity, but judge results with almost impossible standards. He never lost curiosity. He never softened his standards. The duality is rare for sure, but it's very powerful. Try combining them. Beginner mindset. Ask why more often without using your ego, and elite standards when you choose to build something aimed for excellence. Most people only have one of these. You want both. Okay, so that's his psychology. We've looked at the mindset that powered the biggest leaps in Steve's career and how you can model those in your own life without needing to become a turtleneck wearing tyrant. Now let's move into something more practical, the business strategies that made Apple unstoppable, not the hype, the real strategic decisions you can apply today. So let's crack open the next case file. So How did Steve actually build things that last? Simplicity, not as a design preference, but as a business strategy. Clarity scales and complexity kills. One pillar topic, one main style, and one upload schedule. And if you're building a business, one offer, one type of customer, and one core promise. Once that's working, then you expand, not before. Simplicity is not sexy, but it prints money. Jobs hated relying on other companies to make Apple products work. This brings us to vertical integration. He built a philosophy around vertical integration, owning every part of the experience. The hardware, made by Apple. Software, by Apple. Retail, Apple. Accessories, Apple. Even the boxes are Apple. This means one thing: perfect control over quality. And it created something competitors still struggle with. Apple products feel cohesive. Your value takeaway: you don't have to own everything, but you should own the most important pieces. If you're a creator, write your scripts, control your identity, and know your audience better than anyone else. If you're running a small business, own your customer communication, own your product standards, and own the parts that matter most: reputation. Integration creates trust, and trust compounds. There's a famous internal line from Apple: design is how it works. The Jobs didn't care about faster processors or more RAM if those numbers didn't mean anything to people, because people are buying the products. Instead, he obsessed over how humans actually behave. Questions like, why do people hesitate to use computers? Where do their hands naturally rest? What confuses them? What scares them? What delights them? The results? Products that didn't just function, they felt right. And your value takeaway is: study human behavior, not industry trends. Creators, what do your viewers actually need help with? And what keeps them watching? What makes them leave? And then for the entrepreneurs, what do your customers actually fear? What annoys them about competing products? What emotional moments trigger a purchase? If you build for people, you'll always win. If you build for specs, you'll always chase. And then fourth strategy is just extreme consistency. Repetition creates legends. People think innovation means constantly reinventing yourself. Steve didn't see it that way. He believed in iterating the same idea until it became masterpiece level. The iPod, then the better iPod, then a better iPod, then the iPhone, which was the iPod with a phone attached, and the iPad, which was basically a stretched out iPhone. Jobs wasn't cycling through random ideas. He was refining one idea from every possible angle. How portable can it be? How intuitive can it be? How essential can we make it? How beautiful can it be? Consistency looks like boring on the outside, but internally it creates mastery. And your takeaway is: pick one thing and tune it like a musician tuning a single string. For creators, keep one format, one tone, one core message. And businesses, keep improving the same offer, same customers, and same promise. Repetition is reputation. And here's some overlap for the entrepreneurs and creators, or if you're both. Narrative as a business weapon. This might be one of the most overlooked strategies Jobs use. Steve didn't just sell products, he sold identity. He made buying an Apple product feel like joining a tribe, a ritual, a lifestyle. He told stories. Think Different wasn't an ad, it was permission. Launch events weren't demos, they were performances. And Apple stores weren't shops. They were temples to creativity. Jobs understood something we all forget. People don't buy things, they buy meaning. Your takeaway is: your narrative matters a lot. For creators, what is your story on your channel telling? Identity do your viewers feel connected to? What do you stand for? And for businesses, what promise are you making? What worldview are you reinforcing? What transformation are you offering? If you don't tell your story, someone else will. Or worse, no one will care. Set unreasonable standards, but with some sort of empathy. Jobs demanded excellence from everyone around him, but here's the part people miss. He also respected excellence whenever he saw it. He didn't treat people as replaceable, he treated them as capable of brilliance. There's a quote from Johnny Ive: "We've become the best versions of ourselves because Steve expected it." High standards aren't about perfection, they're about belief. You hold people to low expectations, you rob them of the chance to rise. Your takeaway? Whether you're building a team, a channel, or a business, expect the best and provide the support that makes it achievable. Unreasonable standards plus emotional understanding equals greatness. Alright, so now we've broken down the strategies, the blueprint that Steve actually used to turn Apple into a force of nature, but it goes deeper. There's a deeper layer to the story that ties all of it together. So let's move into the heart of this episode, the philosophies that guided Steve Jobs, and how you can use them without becoming a perfectionist monk or a barefoot tech messiah. Let's open up the next case file. So we've talked psychology, we've talked strategy, but now it's time to get into the part that people often overlook, the things Steve believed about life itself, because his philosophies weren't just motivational quotes, they were frameworks that shaped how he moved, what he built, and why he built it. And honestly, some of them are surprisingly grounded and extremely useful for anyone trying to level up. So let's dive in. The first one is: everything around you was made by people no smarter than you. This is one of Jobs' most famous quotes from an interview he gave in the 1990s. He said, "Everything around you that you call life was made up by people no smarter than you. And you can change it, you can influence it. Once you learn that, you'll never be the same again." This wasn't arrogance, it was liberation. Jobs realized early on that the rules most people live by are just inherited assumptions. Why can't a phone be beautiful? Why can't a computer be simple? Why can't a tiny startup change the world? People told him he was thinking too big, but the alternative was thinking too small. Your takeaway: the world is flexible, people's expectations are soft, and change is possible and often easier when you stop asking for permission. What you need to do is start the project, post the video, launch the business, and change the direction. The people who built the world you live in started with zero experience as well. So philosophy 2 is ruthless prioritization. Jobs once said, "Innovation is saying no to 1,000 things." People often interpret this as minimalism, but it's deeper. He believed energy is finite, attention is finite, and willpower is finite. So your life becomes the sum of what you choose to ignore. Jobs didn't chase every idea. He hunted the important ideas, the ones that move the vision forward. Value for you guys is if you don't control your focus, everything else will control it for you. And to apply this, look at your goals and ask which of these actually matter. Then cut the rest, not temporarily, decisively. Your future is determined by what you remove. Third philosophy is stay hungry and stay foolish. From his iconic Stanford commencement speech in 2005, most people quote this but miss why he said it. Hungry means curious, unsatisfied, always exploring. Foolish means willing to fail publicly, mess up, try weird things, and not cling to being seen as smart. Jobs believed that the current moment you protect your identity more than your growth, your creativity dies. Your takeaway: be willing to look dumb while you learn something new. That's where all real growth happens. Creators who take risks, entrepreneurs who reinvent themselves win. Anyone who experiments wins. It's the fear of looking foolish that keeps most people stuck. Okay, fourth philosophy: don't live by someone else's script. Your time is limited, and this is what Jobs said at the same Stanford commencement speech. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. This wasn't a poetic line, it was literal. Jobs had early brushes with mortality. He got arrested, he got fired from his own company, he traveled through India seeking clarity. Later, of course, he battled cancer. These moments opened up his eyes to something simple and uncomfortable. Most people follow scripts written by society, parents, teachers, culture, and never ask questions whether or never question whether those scripts actually fit. And your takeaway is you have full permission to rewrite what success means for you, and that definition will shift you as you grow. You can pivot careers, you can change what you care about, you can stop doing things because you should build a life that makes sense to you, not a checklist. Freedom comes from questioning the scripts you inherited. Philosophy number 5, connect the dots looking backwards. From that same Stanford commencement, you can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backwards. He argued that life only makes sense in hindsight. In the moment, everything feels random, chaotic, disconnected. As we talked about earlier, and Jobs took a typography class for fun years later, and it shaped Mac's revolutionary design. He wandered through India, and it influenced his simplicity, first world view. He was fired from Apple, which led to Pixar, and then next, the exact experiences that made him into the leader Apple needed later. The value for you guys is you don't need to know how everything fits together yet. Just follow what feels meaningful and trust that the dots will connect. Clarity comes later, action comes now. Just take that first step. All right, so we walked through some of the philosophies, the deep beliefs that shaped every move Steve made. And more importantly, we've translated those beliefs into something you can use today. But there's one last piece of the story we need to cover. The part people rarely talk about: what happens at the end of his life and the hard lessons he left us with, not as CEO, but as a human being. This final section isn't about tech, it's about perspective. So let's open the last case file. All right, so this last part is a little bit different because everything we've talked about so far, the psychology, the strategy, and the philosophy, those things Steve used while he was building. But at the end of his life, when everything got quiet, he started thinking differently, more honestly, more simply. And I think this is where the real value is for all of us. So let's get into it. Not in a heavy way, but just like in a human way. And so towards the end, the first thing he realized was time is the only real resource. Steve spent a lot of his life sprinting. Intensity was his baseline. and that's kind of an understatement. He accomplished unbelievable things because of it, but he knew his time was running out. When he knew, his perspective changed. According to close friends and biographers, Steve became almost laser focused on one idea. Time is the only thing you never get back. Money regenerates, opportunities return, status fades and comes back. Failures don't stay failures as well. But time, once you spend it, that's it. That's all. And this is your takeaway. Audit your time like it's a bank account. Spend it on people, projects, and experiences that actually mean something. A lot of people waste years doing things they hate out of habit. In jobs, life reminds us we don't get unlimited cycles, as far as we know. For the second one, he realized relationships matter more than achievements. In his final years, Steve reportedly became more family-focused, more reflective, and more emotionally open. Jobs' wife said something powerful at his memorial. He had an enormous capacity for love. It's interesting. Someone known for their intensity, conflict, and obsession is also remembered by the people closest to him as warm, funny, empathetic, and deeply sentimental. And then the value for you guys is you guys can chase excellence without sacrificing the people who make life worth living. Success is meaningful, legacy is also meaningful, but connection is irreplaceable. Even Jobs understood that, especially at the end. His third realization, he realized simplicity isn't just a design principle, it's a life principle. In his last months, Steve told his biographer, Walter Isaacson, life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact. Everything around you is made up by people no smarter than you. Yeah, that quote again. Because its meaning changes when you're facing morality. Steve realized his obsession with simplicity wasn't about products, it was about peace. Removing distractions, removing unnecessary obligations, removing anything that diluted energy from what mattered. Your takeaway. Minimalism isn't about owning less, it's about being less scattered, less divided, more present. If your life feels chaotic, it's really because you have too much to do. It's usually because too many things don't matter. For the fourth realization he came to is Jobs said something beautiful near the end of his life. It's creativity is just connecting things. We often think creativity is magical or mysterious, that some people have it and others don't, but Steve realized creativity is really about being curious, paying attention, and allowing disparate pieces of your life to overlap. Your takeaway is don't wait to feel ready or inspired. Just live fully, observe deeply, and the ideas will come from the dots you've collected. Every relationship, every job, every mistake, every win, it's all raw material. And so for the fifth takeaway is in Isaacson's biography, Jobs reflected on legacy in a rarely vulnerable moment. He talked about how products fade, companies change, technology becomes obsolete, but the impact you have on people, that's the thing that lasts. Mentors, teammates, friends, family, those ripples don't go away. Success isn't about what you can accumulate, it's about your contribution to society. You influence people every single day. A coworker you encouraged, a viewer you inspired, a friend you listened to, a family member you supported. That's your real legacy, not the metrics. The final takeaway from Steve Jobs' life is at one point near the end, Jobs says, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want. You don't need permission slips for your own life. You don't need the perfect plan. You don't need everything figured out. Purpose isn't something you discover. It's something you decide. Choose a direction, any direction, and move. Purpose is built through motion, not meditation. Don't wait for clarity. Clarity comes from action. So what do you do with all of this? What do you do? We take the psychology and the strategy and the philosophy and the perspective, and we use them to build a life with intention. Not a perfect life, not a billionaire life even, just a meaningful one. One where your time feels well spent, your work feels purposeful, your relationships feel nourished, and your creativity feels alive. That's the real case file here. You're the case file. We're just learning all this through Steve Jobs. If you have any other creators or entrepreneurs, tech giants such as Steve Jobs that you want me to cover, go ahead, put it in the comment section. If you enjoyed everything, leave a like and subscribe. And thank you so much for joining me on this journey. We're just getting started and I have so much planned for everybody. Thank you so much again. Bye.